Hello and welcome back to Library of Ruina Ranked, the Abnormality Edition. In this video, we'll be going over all of Chesed's abnormalities. In my first playthrough, I heavily underrated Chesed's floor, so let's see why that is. Starting us off in Tier 1, our F tier page is Torn Off Wisdom. This page gives an effect to a single ally that makes it so that whenever they use a page, they restore 1 light and discard a random page, with this effect excluding on-play pages. This page does have some strong upside, making all your pages cheaper in a sense, but the downside of discarding a page every time is pretty brutal. Maybe if you're a better player than me, you'll have a build that makes this page busted, but for general use, since pages in hand is more limiting than light, this is more downside than upside. Next, in D tier, we have Rake. This page gives a buff to a single ally that makes it so that when they stagger an enemy, they copy 2 pages owned by that enemy and adds them to the librarian's hand and makes them cost 2 less, but the pages exhaust on use. Against enemies with shimmering, it doesn't do anything, and melee key pages can only get melee pages. This page does look like an on-stagger draw 2 pages with upside, but this is worse because you usually build your decks around certain strategies and opponents don't necessarily line up with that. The effect is still strong, don't get me wrong, but this is kind of win more because when you're able to get a specific librarian to stagger an enemy, you're at least able to stagger an enemy, but also more likely to be able to manipulate clashes or choose how to clash. Being a +3 also leans into that, but pages that are only good when you're ahead are kind of bad because there isn't really any X factors and receptions that necessitate you needing to rush to finish a fight. Our C tier page is Timber. This page gives a buff to a single ally that makes it so that when they're attacking a target with more light than the librarian, their offensive dice gain power equal to the amount of light the target has with a max of 2 power. Note that this looks at the target's light rather than the difference between the 2 characters is light, so you're very likely to just get the 2 power if your librarian has less light. This page feels rather inconsistent because usually your librarian's light economy is better, having the benefit of a larger card pool. In the early scenes, you're likely to have full light quite often as you emo up, and then in multi-act fights, you'll just have more light than your opponents, so you kind of need to do work for the buff, but when you do get it, it's almost always just 2 power for your offensive dice, which is very strong of course. The main issue is, again, you need to jump through some hoops to get the light bonus, but maybe if you can dump all your light every scene, then it'll be stronger. In B tier, we have Gleaning. This page gives a buff to a single ally that makes them deal 2 to 4 bonus stagger damage and recover 2 to 5 stagger resist against enemies with more stagger than them. This is a trigger condition that's very easy to get. Enemies will usually just innately have more stagger than your librarians, and since you get to choose where the page goes, you can choose an ally who got hit a bunch early and get a really nice double mind hauler effect. Against bosses especially, this page really shines, although I feel like Chesed's top 2 pages are just on another level. Our A tier page is Cartier. This page gives a buff to a single ally that reduces the cost of the 2 most expensive pages in hand by 1 if they deal 15 or more damage to enemies in a single scene, and, on kill, it reduces the cost of the pages to 0, and the cost reduction effect is reset when the pages are used. Dealing 15 damage per scene is trivial, so this basically just gives you 2 light per scene with the additional upside of sometimes reducing the cost of your pages to 0. In contrast to Torn Off Wisdom, which gives you between 2 and 4 light per scene, you do get less light on average, but you get to keep all your cards, and the difference between them is night and day in my opinion. Finally, surprising no one, our S tier page is Courage. This page gives a buff to a single ally that gives them strength and protection equal to the number of living allies minus 2, and if there are less than 2, then they get feeble and fragile instead. This page gives you 3 strength and protection each scene as long as all your allies are alive, and doesn't have a downside until your librarian is alone. While Cartier gives you really good resource management so you can cast your bombs more often, Courage sidesteps that by just making all of your pages roll like bombs, and it's pretty hard to say no to that. Moving on to tier 2 pages, our F tier page is Oblivion. This page adds a card, Oblivion, to the selected librarian's hand, and is included in the librarian's deck in future acts. Oblivion is a 3-cost single-use on-play page that immobilizes the librarian and makes them untargetable. Then, at the end of the scene, they recover 40% of their max HP and fully restore their light. This page doesn't really advance your game plan very well. Pages that were targeting your librarian get sent to a random ally, so you can't even use it to cancel pages, and it basically is just a stall for a single librarian. The heal is nice, but it cuts your damage, which makes it nigh unplayable outside of very specific situations. In D tier, we have A Road Walked Together. This page gives an effect to a selected librarian that makes it so that when an ally redirects an attack from them, that ally will gain 1 to 2 power to clash with that page. While this is a potential 1.5 power to 4 of your librarians, I found this page to be wildly inconsistent. On average, the selected librarian will have 1/5 of attacks coming towards them, and so you'll get value on less than 1/5 of the opponent's pages, with no priority to pages you want the power against, as your librarian might just get targeted with 3 utility pages. Additionally, sometimes you just can't redirect the pages, and if you redirect too many, you'll deny your librarian emotion coins. I think the best use case for this page is if you have a librarian that's low on HP that you want to keep alive, so you want to redirect everything away, but other than that, it's profoundly mediocre. I put Home in C tier. This page marks between 1 and 3 enemies each scene with a specific ordering, depending on the number of living allies, and whenever a marked target is attacked in sequence, all allies will deal 3 extra outgoing damage for the scene. While somewhat unwieldy, this page can give your entire team +9 damage every scene, which is pretty incredible. I think people generally underrate this page because it requires thinking, but I honestly take it over Power of the Past and Emerald quite often, but the ceiling of those two are much higher than this page, so that's why it just gets C tier. Next, in B tier, we have Power of the Past. This page gives a buff to a single ally that increases the cost of combat pages by 1, but gives all their dice 3 to 4 power. This is a page that I've been trying to make work, and it can definitely work, but it requires a lot of build around, which takes away a lot of its points. I'm not sure what the best sort of build for this is, and this might be a bit of a controversial placement, but I think it's just a bit too awkward to beat our top 2 pages. Our A tier page is Emerald. This page adds a card, Emerald, to the select the librarian's hand, and is included in the librarian's deck in future acts. Emerald is a 5-cost page that, on play, cancels 2 random combat pages of the selected enemy, and the user recovers 1 light for each successful hit on targets this scene, with a max of 2, and the cost of the page can't be changed. This is situationally an extremely strong page, but is usually at least pretty strong. 5 light is a steep cost, but you get refunded part of it, and cancelling 2 pages on a boss is extremely powerful. Against trash fights, it's pretty mediocre, and I might take Home over it if I'm not building around Power of the Past, but even in fights where there's a leader enemy like the Section 1 fight, it can do good work. In S tier, we have a Warm Heart. This page gives a buff to a single ally that boosts the power of offensive dice by 1 to 2 if they have 3 or more light at the start of the scene. This effect is pretty trivial to trigger, so it acts like a 1.5 power boost to offensive dice basically always. This page isn't super glamorous, but it'll always be very strong, whereas Emerald requires a certain type of enemy to be great, and Power of the Past requires a lot of work to be incredible. Interestingly, this page is generally just weaker than Courage, but that's more of a showcase of how strong that page is, rather than a weakness of this one. Moving on to tier 3, I put False Presence in D tier. This page adds 0-cost False Present pages to your librarian's hand and gives various effects. Liquid Courage makes the librarian deal 6 extra damage with attacks, but take 3 extra damage from attacks. Silk Sack of Sawdust makes the librarian recover 8 stagger resist on Clash Win, but take 4 stagger resist on Clash Lose. Heart of Lead makes the librarian lose 5 HP and restore 1 light each scene. Home That Cannot Be Reached makes the librarian take 4 stagger damage on Clash Lose, but adds 2 power to the next die, and Transformation makes it so that when the librarian wins a clash with an offensive die, they destroy the opponent's next die at a 50% chance, but when they lose a clash to an offensive die, their next die is destroyed at a 50% chance. That's quite a lot, but to be honest, these effects are all pretty mediocre. The best one is Heart of Light, then I guess Transformation, but this page is pretty much just not worth taking in my opinion. Next, I put Powder of Life in C tier. This page gives a buff to all your allies that revives them at 20% HP when they die once per reception with a max of 24 HP. This effect lets you play a lot more recklessly, as your librarians will stay alive for longer, but its defensive slant limits its effectiveness when ahead, and it doesn't really help you win if you're far behind because it doesn't give you dice power or economy. Finally, I put Magic Trick in S tier. This page adds a card, Magic Trick, to the selected librarian's hand and is included in the librarian's deck in future acts. Magic Trick is a 4-cost on-play page that reduces the cost of all pages in hand to 0, with the cost being reset when they're used, and the cost of the page can't be changed. At its baseline, this page costs 4 light and will often save you 8 or more light over a couple of scenes, which is pretty incredible, but we can go deeper. Using some copies of Clone on a mass attack like Yan's Distorted Blade or Purple Tear's Mirage Storm, we can cast 4 of them in a single scene and wipe the fight. this will often just win the reception on its own. Even without that, the general case is still quite strong, and Chesed's tier 3s aren't anything to write home about like Spring's Genesis would be. Overall, Chesed's floor has quite a lot of sustain and courage, which makes it pretty strong. I have it rated 4th in my floor rankings, and in the next video, we'll be going over all of Bina's abnormalities. I'll see you soon, and as always, thank you for watching.